Hi, I'm Mike Gilliam, and welcome to A Slice of New York. We're celebrating Black History Month in the Mecca of Black culture, Harlem. There's so much going on in the community that it's difficult to know where to begin. How do most people know Harlem? Is it the Apollo Theater or 125th Street and its rich history? One thing that draws people to the community is the excellent food. And you can't really talk about the food and hospitality in Harlem without talking about Sylvia's restaurant. Eating there is like taking a walk back into much of Harlem's history. Check it out.
You should get that feeling like when you walk into your grandmother's house.
For more than 60 years, Sylvia's restaurant has been dishing out soul food in Harlem. The eatery was founded by the queen of soul food, Sylvia Woods, in 1962, and it's been going strong ever since.
I think the success of the restaurant is all wrapped around the love of people and the community, because it was real love. Now, it was no pretense. She loved people and she took care of people.
Sylvia died in 2012. Her son Kenneth is now president and owner, and the family carries on her legacy at the restaurant located at 126th and Lenox. They've served everyone, from the stars to presidents to those who simply needed a meal.
She had on the menu early on what you call a bowl and a roll. You know, for anyone, it was always something on the menu that someone could afford, you know, and she would not allow anyone to go hungry.
This area right here, a lot of famous people have been in this area, right?
We had a round table here that for years that became a symbol.
Who sat at that table?
Oh, goodness. Barack Obama. And the thing about that table, if you was running for office, you had to come to Sylvia's and sit at that table, because if you sat at that table, you was guaranteed to win.
Oh, really?
I could tell you stories, but through the years, that table had produced many winners. Dinkins, Bill Clinton. You know, the list is phenomenal.
Charlie Rangel?
Oh, Charlie Rangel is like family. He was my mom and dad lawyer for when they went into business.
To walk through Sylvia's and look at the pictures on the walls is like walking through Harlem history. James Brown, Sidney Poitier, Danny Glover, Magic Johnson, Nelson and Winnie Mandela, Don King, and Bill Clinton have all sat at Sylvia's table. The restaurant has survived some tough times, including the riots after Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated, when a lot of Harlem businesses burned.
People was angry, but the restaurant was spared out of all of that because it was the community home.
Tourists have been flocking to Sylvia's for years for the Southern hospitality and food.
The buses started coming, and then Gail Green, New York Magazine, wrote a story on Sylvia's. Uptown Saturday Night, something like that was the title. And that just blew the doors off. It not only opened up the rest of New York, but the rest of the United States.
Okay, so Marcus Woods is here in the kitchen, and a lot of people tell me that the real magic at Sylvia's happens right in here. Is that right?
Yeah, this is where it all happens.
Okay, and a lot of people come for the chicken too, right?
Yeah, that's where they all come for. At least for the first time, you got to try the chicken.
Okay, show me how to make the chicken.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right.
So, first thing, the most important part of the chicken is the bird, right? So
yeah.
This is our house seasoning, our house rub. It's a little bit of salt, some pepper, and some other things that I can't tell on camera.
The secret stuff.
The secret stuff.
Okay.
But my grandmother would just call it love.
So you don't skimp on the flour?
No. that's
the
going to mess
fried
up the
chicken one
fry.
of your most popular dishes here at the restaurant? Is that
It is. It is the most popular dish,
Okay.
and you know that's our bread and butter. You know,
Uh-huh.
and you can't talk about soul food without talking about some fried chicken, right?
Can't do it. Can't do it. Then the chicken goes into the fryer.
So when you drop stuff in the fryer,
Mm-hmm.
drop it away from you.
Ah,
All
okay,
right.
so it doesn't splatter back.
Yeah.
Okay.
Perfect. Look like you've been doing this.
I could, right? And in 15 to 20 minutes, the finished product. And meals like that have continued to draw customers from Harlem, across the country, and around the world.
This is classic. This is like a staple here in Harlem. If you want to eat well, this is where you would come.
All the way from San Francisco, and I find you at Sylvia's. Why?
Because I read that it's an institution and it's a place that we hadn't been. We love fried chicken and waffles, and so we came all the way here just to have it.
All the way from San Francisco?
That's right.
What did you think of the restaurant?
The restaurant exceeded expectations. It was a lovely setting, nice and chill environment.
When you come to Sylvia's, you're coming into our home, you know, and I think that's what set Sylvia's apart. The first time you come, you're a guest. The next time I see you, you're your family.
That friendly environment and the delicious food really sets Sylvia's apart. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll be joined by some special guests. We'll talk about the history of Harlem and some of its institutions, and also what the future looks like. This is A Slice of New York. Welcome back. I'm Mike Gilliam, and this is A Slice of New York. We're celebrating Harlem, and here to give us a better understanding of the community and its rich history, we have three guests. William Gibbons is an archivist, librarian, and associate professor at the City College of New York. He also gives tours for an organization called Harlem One Stop as a way of giving back to the community and making Harlem a part of his classroom. We also have the Associate Professor of Black Studies at City College of New York, Laurie Woodard, and journalist, author, teacher, and activist Herb Boyd. Thank you all for joining us. Laurie, let's start with you. Originally, it was Native Americans who lived in Harlem, right?
Yeah, that's absolutely true. The Lenape people lived all over Manhattan and in Upper Manhattan. And so they were the original Harlemites.
Mm-hmm. Fast forward a bit to the Revolutionary War. There's a situation there where Harlem actually burned down, right, William?
The battle took place at Columbia University in that area. George Washington's headquarters and command post was actually in Washington Heights, one of the highest points in the area at Jamel Mansion. And from there, he had the high ground as he saw the troops coming up. It was a battle that the Loyalists had won.
Mm-hmm. And Herb, things began to change kind of after the Civil War. I'm kind of moving quickly through history here, but after the Civil War, things in Harlem began to change, right?
Like a real fast forward, Mike.
Yeah.
Right. Well, there's so much ground to cover there. If you go back to what Laurie is talking about with the Lenape, which are the indigenous people of this territory, and of course what William is talking about is moving into the Revolutionary period, George Washington, Hamilton Heights, Alexander Hamilton, the so-called founding fathers, settling in. And then you move it right on down quickly into the 18th and 19th century. And that's where you begin to talk about Harlem, that's really established as a location.
And William, talk to us a little bit about exactly what that location is now for Harlem.
There's three Harlems today. There's East, from the East River to Fifth Avenue, Central Harlem from Fifth Avenue to St. Nicholas Avenue, and then West Harlem from St. Nicholas Avenue all the way to the Hudson River. Mm-hmm. And so those are the boundaries, those are the districts, and those are the three Harlems.
Okay. Laurie, when did blacks and Puerto Ricans start to move into Harlem?
They end up moving up into Harlem into the early 20th century, they started developing the 7th Avenue subway, and Harlem at that point was moving from a predominantly rural farming European community into a kind of an upscale suburb of downtown New York, a kind of a Westchester of Manhattan. And they had this idea that they were going to develop Harlem and you could take the subway straight down to Wall Street quick. But then they had delays in the development of the subway, and Harlem throughout the late 19th and most of the 20th century was a lot of boom and bust, in that there was a lot of investment for a minute and then there was nothing, and disinvestment and vice versa. And so in the late 19th, early 20th, the first decades of the 20th century, partially as a part of the Great Migration all over the country, but up Manhattan as well, Black people start moving into Harlem. They are incentivized by organizations like Abyssinian Baptist Church and individuals like Philip Payton, who was a Black realtor. And so they are offering people, people are living downtown, it's crowded, it's tenement buildings, and there's this amazing new, huge, gorgeous Classic 6 apartments that are being built. Like I said, originally as a kind of a upscale Westchester type neighborhood, but Black people are able to move in. However, it is expensive, and that leads to doubling up and so on and so forth. But by the 19 teens, 1915, 1920s, it is becoming predominantly Black.
The African-American population hits full force. You talk about a Marcus Garvey, for example, arriving in Harlem. That's in 1915, 1916. So it's a critical dates there in terms of having the magnetism of individuals that attract even more people coming in beyond the so-called first major migration period of around World War I, and then to World War II, the larger migration comes in. And so it's an intensification of the population.
Laurie, in my research, I came across something that really surprised me, and that was that the Apollo, early on when it was first built, didn't allow Blacks?
Right, that's correct. Most of the theaters in the area, as Harlem was making that transition from a predominantly European population to a predominantly Black population, they didn't allow Black patrons, period, or if they did allow them, they were up in the balcony.
The Apollo Theater is a kind of a vortex in one sense, because when you talk about the overall United States, and then in the center, people talk about the center of that is going to be New York City. Then the center of New York City is going to be the Harlem community for African Americans. And the center of Harlem is the Apollo Theater. And the history there is so rich in terms of entertainment, politics, entrepreneurial developments, all the things spin off of individuals like Percy Ellis Sutton, who came along in a period, along with Charles Rangel, individuals, political leaders. The so-called Gang of Four is also key as how politics and culture come together.
And before we go to break, I want to talk real briefly about the Harlem Renaissance. I know that doesn't make sense because this is such a huge topic, but Laurie, kind of talk to us a little bit about the Harlem Renaissance.
Yeah, so as Herb was mentioning, Harlem becomes a hub, right? The so-called Negro Mecca, right? And the Harlem Renaissance is a fusion of individuals, artists, activists, intellectuals, performing artists, visual artists, writers, people who are engaged in anti-racism, people who are forming a kind of artistic community. They come from all different backgrounds, people like Josephine Baker, people like Paul Robeson, people like Freddie Washington, Langston Hughes, of course, Zora Neale Hurston are the key names that everybody knows, but they are coming together to, and one of the things that's interesting about this period is that because of segregation, right, they're brought together for shared goals and dreams and aspirations, business projects, economic, artistic, cultural, all of that, but they're kind of held together because of segregation. And so they form this very tight-knit community of artists, intellectuals, and activists that really drive the Harlem Renaissance and this notion of a rebirth of Black identity and Black experience.
Great, great. Thank you, Laurie. We've talked a lot about the early history, and we're moving closer to the present day and the changes that we see in Harlem. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll look at modern day Harlem and how we got to where we are now. This is a slice of New York. This is a slice of New York. I'm Mike Gilliam. Changes were happening around the time of the two world wars. Herb, I've often seen Harlem mentioned when we talk about sports stars being there, like Jackie Robinson, Sugar Ray Robinson,
Sugar Ray,
Willie Mays playing stickball in Harlem. This is kind of around the time when Harlem was really thriving, right?
Oh, no doubt about it. And add to that Joe Louis, because in 1935 is like a key date in Harlem's history. You're absolutely right, though, Mike, in talking about the whole athletic influence that's happening there. Even with black baseball, you know, you got the Negro leagues, you know, to say nothing of what's happening on the basketball court with the Harlem Wrens. You talk about Harlem Renaissance, there's a Harlem Wrens, Bob Douglas, who was the creator of that.
I didn't
and
know
then
that.
down to Holcomb Rucker later on. Right now we have Rucker Park. It is a historic designation. So all of these things, the sports is coming together. And of course, that's a centerpiece along with, as Laurie suggests, the theater is right there. The whole entrepreneurial development, Black nationalism is on the move, to say nothing of what's happening, you know, with some of the other literary aspects of the Harlem community.
But there are also times when Harlem declined as well, right? So you had like a rebirth and just changes that were taking place, correct?
Civil rights opens up opportunities for other African Americans, the Black middle class, to move to other parts of New York City. Now it's no longer just a ghetto anymore. People are able to move. Lena Horne, Louis Armstrong, Count Basie, they moved to Queens, right? And so what is happening as a result of that is Harlem is losing its middle class. And so by the 60s, 70s, you have everyday hardworking people of African descent in Harlem moving out.
Okay.
And so
For better housing opportunities?
better housing opportunities, better schools, and the so-called better quality of life.
As desegregation happens across the country, people have the opportunity to go to places where there are better housing, actual houses as opposed to apartments, and so better schools, better, right? And so people who can do that do, and it is predominantly the income generating portion of the population, right? The middle class, but the age of people who are working, right? Which leaves Harlem by the 1970s with a lot of very young people and a lot of very old people and not very much investment, right?
Kind
And
of guts the community.
It guts the community, exactly.
Herb, let's talk a little bit about government's role in Harlem during that time. At one point, the city owned a lot of Harlem, right?
Housing development, transportation, all those things are kind of converge and keyed, and you have the confluence of those things happening.
So Mike, by the 1970s, by the mid-70s, New York City owned 60% of the housing stock in Harlem. And that was from abandonment, neglect, and landlords in arrears with their property taxes and their buildings being taken over. So if you were a family looking to move out of Harlem, and you couldn't sell your brownstone, you couldn't sell your place, you would just walk away and leave it, right? Because people thought that Harlem would never come back. The city does not want to be a landlord. So how does the city, by the 1980s, get that housing portfolio out of the public domain and back into the private market? That was the challenge.
And how did they do it?
Through Mayor Ed Koch, Dave Dinkins, and Giuliani, at different points and at different times, partnership with the private sector, the Rockefellers, nonprofits, churches, and other community organizations like the Urban League, Abyssinian Baptist Church, to create affordable home ownership opportunities.
I'd be remiss if we didn't talk about Percy Sutton and the work that he did both with the Apollo and Harlem. Herb, you want to start it?
Oh, yeah, well, that's my surrogate father. I have about 4 or 5 of them, but Percy is key there because I worked with him in so many capacities. The last time we were together, we were talking about the whole development of AI. He was on top of artificial intelligence before his death. A lot of people don't know that. And what he was trying to do that and bring it into play through his radio holdings, Institute of Broadcasting, Inner City Broadcasting Company, to say nothing of what was going on with the Apollo Theater, because he rescued it in the 1980s when it was absolutely desolate there in terms of the overflow, the flooding, the rats running around and everything. He came in and rescued that. So he was kind of a savior of Harlem to a great degree.
Where do you see Harlem in the next 10 to 20 years? William?
I see the housing market stabilized. I see property still going for $2 to $3 million. I do not see displacement happening in Harlem. 90% of Harlem residents are rent protected. And I'm hopeful for a cultural resurgence in the Harlem community.
Okay. Laurie, how about you?
So I see Harlem becoming a very diverse community. Yes, some people will be pushed out, have been pushed out, but because of New York rent laws, which allow you to take your grandmother's apartment, for example, if your grandmother passes away, if you grew up there, right, that you can take it over for the same rent that she was paying, a lot of people are actually able to stay, right? They don't have to leave, right? And so new people are coming in, but it is becoming, I think, there is concerns about cultural identity, but there is a potential for a very, very diverse community. And I would be remiss in not talking about City College, which back in 1969, the students took over the college demanding 5 demands, one of which was a Black Studies department. They won that demand. Over the course of time, they lost that demand in that the department was created, but then it was reduced to program status, right? And in the last year, we have brought it back, and we are now a Black Studies department in the heart of Harlem, right? And this was something that everybody thought was really problematic, that there wasn't a Black Studies department in the heart of Harlem. So I think that City College, the institutions, the Apollo, it's changing, but it's not like a tidal wave, right? It is in and out and sort of ebb and flow, and I think it has a bright future.
Where do you see Harlem going over the next 10 to 20 years?
Well, I think it's hard to predict anything about what's going on in our world today. It's just so discombobulated. But I would think that one thing is absolutely predictable, and that's the spirit of Harlem. You cannot eradicate that. That's something absolutely indelible, that is fixed in what you call the cultural matrix of that community. It's there. And it's going to depend on a lot of the residents and their families to make sure that's in place, that it's inviolable, it's ineffable. So I think in as much as we have our artists, we have our teachers and our activists out there who are concerned about how the community goes, we don't have to worry too much about it being destroyed in any way. That the spirit of that is just so absolutely impenetrable. We're going to keep that. It's going to hold on to that. But it's left for the families to make sure that's done.
Okay, good. That'll have to be the last word. I want to thank our guest, William Gibbons, who's an archivist, librarian, and associate professor at the City College of New York, who also gives tours of Harlem for Harlem One Stop. Associate professor of Black Studies at City College of New York, Laurie Woodard, and journalist, author, teacher, and activist, Herb Boyd. Thank you all for coming in. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
And thanks to the folks at Sylvia's as well. And thank you for joining us. I'm Mike Gilliam. We'll see you next time on A Slice of New York.